Well, hello. Look at all you people out there. Hi. Okay, so welcome. Oh, I'm Dwyer. Hello. I follow Kemetia around because she is fearless, and I want to be like that someday. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Today's show benefits PPMT. Thank you very much for the donations that you might have made over there or still haven't made, but it's still over there. Okay, the only housekeeping is to make sure that you know where the exits are. There's an exit there under the exit sign, and then there's another exit through this door, that door, and there's a yellow line that you follow to get outside, sort of like Dorothy. Okay, so it is my privilege to introduce Kemetia to tonight. Kemetia Foley is a past member of Story District, a storytelling group in Washington, D.C., and is a frequent participant in varied local storytelling events, including Couch to Mike, True Tales Live, New Hampshire, and the 3S Arts, and the 3S Art Space Staple, Long Story Short. Kemetia lives in York, Maine, with her husband of 28 years, Brian. Their grown daughter, Kateri, is making her way in New York City, working for New York City Emergency Management. Kemetia and Brian survived the daily thrill of their feisty cat, Fiona. If you know Fiona, you know what that means. The 4 stories being shared here tonight cover the theme of advice, and there'll be a short break after the second story. Come on in. Okay, and with that, I would very much like to get out of the way for fearless Kemetia. Come on up.
Woohoo! This has been a dream of mine for some time, so I'm really happy to have everybody here. So thank you for coming out and supporting. It means a lot to me. If you know anything about my family, you know that I come from a family of storytellers. I am not even the best storyteller in my family. My brother Bill is. So there are 5 Foley siblings. Steve, from the oldest to the youngest. I'm the youngest of the 5 of us. Therefore, I am FIC5. That is the Foley's in charge, and that is our family mantra. We are in charge, which is a very funny story because in actuality, I'm never in charge, but I just think I am. But my oldest brother, Stephen, my brother Bill, my brother Mark, my sister Nidra, and then me, and my brother Bill, who lives in Oklahoma, is by far the best storyteller of us all. But they're just inappropriate, so he doesn't share them publicly. Yeah, so I'll hook you guys up if you want some information. So tonight's stories, you may see this picture back here. It represents my late father, William T. Foley, or as we affectionately call him, WTF. He was the original Karen, and he was the original Karen. Trust me when I say that. I'm so glad social media did not exist when he was living, because he would be banned from all channels. It would be ugly. It would not be good. But anyways, he was the original FIC, and all of the stories that you hear have to do with came from him and how he raised us kids. Now, my dad raised me by himself. So my oldest siblings were out on their own. When my parents split, I originally went with my mom and my sister to Oklahoma, where my mother's from. I decided Oklahoma was not for me whatsoever, and asked my dad to come get me. And so at the ripe age of 9, and my father was 42, I moved back to the East Coast, and my father raised me from that time on. So he was an advice giver, whether you wanted it or not. And a lot of his sayings that I will share with you tonight have been passed down through the generations of our family as de facto. So any advice he gave was coming with love, but he expected you to follow it even if you disagreed with it. And I was very intimidated by my dad. He was a Navy guy, and I loved him a lot. So I miss him, and I wanted to honor him with this show tonight. So thanks for coming out. I'm going to start my stories based on some song lyrics. So if you know anything about me, you may not know that I was a DJ in college. So I was a radio station DJ in college, and I love music of all kinds except for Irish music. I know, my poor husband's sitting back there like, what are you talking about? Because I told him, if you play Irish music at my funeral, I will come back and haunt your ass. And then country music, I have a little bit of trouble with. They're very similar. They're really like, woe is me, and I think I'm just going to jump off a bridge kind of stuff, and I just can't do that. So tonight's first story is based on a Tom Petty song, Won't Back Down. You know, it was second grade. I was raised in Framingham, Massachusetts. And my older brothers and sisters were at other schools, but I was still in elementary school. First grade had been pretty interesting. Jonathan McCarthy had chased all the girls around to kiss us. Ew. I mean, that was first grade. That's all I remember about first grade, is that kid trying to chase us and kiss us. But second grade was going to be better and different, and I was ready for it. So when I got to second grade, I didn't expect to have a teacher who had no personality. I mean, zippy. Like, she was just, ugh. And her name was Mrs. Bowman. So second grade started off kind of rough because she announced right in the first class that my name was too hard. My name was not normal. My name was too hard to spell. And she let me know that I was a problem for her. And she sat me as far across the wall as she could, right by the hallway window. So I could see out that rectangle window and kind of daydream during class when she was picking on me. And as the year progressed, we got ready for Thanksgiving. Now, Massachusetts loves Thanksgiving, and it's all about the Pilgrims, right? And she decided to set up this thing where we would have a little luncheon of Pilgrims and Indians. She counts out the kids, because back then, they said Indians. There wasn't indigenous, there wasn't native. They used the word Indian. They didn't even acknowledge the fact that we had brothers and sisters across the sea. She picks the kids out, goes down the line. Indian, Pilgrim, Indian, Pilgrim. She gets to me, and she says, "You're a Pilgrim." I got a problem with that. Miss Bowman, I can't be a Pilgrim. I'm Indian. She said, "Kemetia, we have picked roles. You are going to be a Pilgrim. Take a seat." No, Miss Bowman, I'm Indian. Really, I'm Indian. I got to be an Indian. I'm not going to be a Pilgrim. Kemetia, what did I just tell you? Take a seat. I stomped up to her. "Miss Bowman, I'm Indian." "Miss Foley, we do not tell fibs in this class. You will go take your seat right now." "I'm Indian." Back to my seat I go. And I got home that afternoon and walked into our house on Palmer Road, and my mother was standing in the kitchen. Now, unbeknownst to Mrs. Bowman, my mother's heritage is Osage. My father's heritage is obviously Irish. And I told her, "Mommy, Mrs. Bowman picked Pilgrims and Indians," and she said, "I have to be a Pilgrim." She said, "You don't have to be a Pilgrim, you're Indian." I said, "I know," but she didn't believe me. She called me a fibber. Really? And I could swear that my 5-foot-tall mother grew to be 8 feet tall. And just looked at me very sternly and said, "Don't you worry about it. Don't let anybody tell you what you can be or not be. I will take care of this." I was like, okay. Couple of days later, I'm sitting in class waiting for this change to happen when out of the corner of the eye, I see this woman passing by the window. My mother had dark hair, darker skin, dark eyes. And as she came past the window, this woman had on turquoise and beads and suede. And she came barreling past that window right to the door of my classroom. Pap, pap, pap. I'd like to speak with Miss Bowman, please. I'm sitting there. I know what's getting ready to happen, I think. My mother says, may I speak to you in the hallway? I could hear the loud voices out in the hallway, but I can't make out exactly what she's saying. She comes back into the classroom, and Miss Bowman looks at me and says, Miss Foley, you could be an Indian. I'm like, yes, I can be an Indian because I am Indian, and I didn't tell a lie. I wasn't lying. I'm not lying, right? Oh, I was pushing my luck. She said, no, Miss Foley, you were not lying. And thank you, and thank your mother for coming down to speak with me. I mean, that woman rolled down that hallway looking like she'd walked off the Land O'Lakes box. I mean, it was awesome. And I was so excited. And I was so proud of my mom. I was like, wow, my mom did that for me. And what I learned from her when I got home that afternoon, she said, did you get to be an Indian? I was like, yes, I did. She said, are you going to be an Indian? Yes, I am. What do you say? Pila Maye. Pila Maye is the Lakota for thank you. I said, Pila Maye. She said, exactly. She said, now, what else did I tell you? Don't let anybody tell me what I can and can't be. That's right, young lady. Don't you ever back down from being who you are. Thank you. So I have to give a plug for the guys at PPM, Portsmouth Public Media Television, who helped set this up tonight. They've been working with me for about 6 months on this show. So I really appreciate all of them. The second story tonight is taking what they're given because I'm working for a living. You know, teenage years are so special. And my father had just about enough of my teenage years between the ages of 15 and 16. And so the summer of my 16th year, my father decided to ship me from Washington, D.C., back up to my grandparents' house in Framingham, Mass. Now, I loved going to my grandparents' house because my grandmother, my grandfather, obviously, they always spoil the grandkids, right? And they lived near this place called Shoppers World. If you're familiar at all with Framingham or Natick, they lived right on the border. And so you could walk down from their house to the biggest shopping mall in that area. And it was fantastic. And I got there, and my grandfather was kind of a quiet guy. He had survived an attack from the Ku Klux Klan as an Irish Catholic. But my grandmother, she was a tough one. Florence Foley. And she had a mustache. She also had a prosthesis, you know. She didn't care. She was going to keep driving. She had a crushed velvet pink sitting chair that she watched the Red Sox in every night. And she was very pious. She was my CCD teacher. So she was a tough cookie. And as that summer wore on, I thought, this is great. I'm away from my dad. I can do whatever I want. And I had a boyfriend. That was the only bad part about going away for the summer, because then I wasn't going to be with my boyfriend. Every night after my grandmother and grandfather would go to bed, or as I called them, Nana and Grampy, They would go to bed, and I would sneak down the tall stairs from my guest room down to the hall landline telephone, because that was the day, and I would whisper and call my boyfriend, and we would talk for hours. I didn't think anything of it. And that went on, I don't know how long, but about 3 weeks probably. And I came down from that guest room one afternoon, and Florence was standing right in front of me with a wad of papers and looking like she was going to murder me. And as I came down the stairs, I knew I was in trouble for something, but I didn't know what it was going to be yet. She said to me, "Young lady, who have you been calling at 11 o'clock at night and talking to for 2 hours?" My boyfriend? Your boyfriend. Do you see this phone bill? Do you see this phone bill? You are going to pay off this phone bill, young lady. You are going to pay for it. It was like $400. Yeah, true love. Young love is great, right? I didn't even think, the shame of it all is I didn't even think to ask my boyfriend to pay it. I should have. But I stood there kind of paralyzed when my grandfather came up behind my grandmother. He said, "What's going on?" And my grandmother let out a tirade. "This girl thinks that she can do anything and she can run up all these bills and you and I are going to get stuck with them and she doesn't care." And I just told her, now I'm starting to cry. I'm like, I suck. I'm like the worst granddaughter ever. And I'm bawling. And she says, "Young lady, you will get a job. But Nana, I don't care what you do. You're going to get a job and you're going to pay off this phone bill." My grandfather's like, Are you going to take a job? Are you going to get a job? I don't know how to do it, like totally a mess, right? Luckily, just at that moment, this fabulous 63 Buick with wings comes barreling into the driveway of my grandparents' house. Out comes the fabulous Sister Mary Justin, the Dominican nun, my grandfather's sister, full penguin gear, the whole habit. And she was a big, jolly woman, and I loved her tremendously. She was my grandfather's sister. And she came into the house just in the middle of all this foray, and she said, What's going on? Why are you crying? What's happening?" "Sister Mary Justin, I have to get a job, and Nana's mad at me, and I'm not going to get to talk to my boyfriend anymore." I mean, 16. It never occurred to me that my father was paying my phone bills. Like, I just clueless, right? I'm a 16-year-old. I'm in my own little world. It's all about me. She said, "Oh, don't you worry." And my grandmother started back in. "Don't you intervene in this. I appreciate you, sister, but she has to pay this bill. I need to get a job. All right, come on, let's go. We're out of this house. Let's go. We're going." Okay. I'm not going to argue with a nun. Are you going to argue with a nun? I'm not going to argue with a nun. She takes me out to this car. She barrels around this circular drive, goes straight down the street, hits a hard right. And there's, in the glorious of her lights, is the Bickford's Pancake House. She goes, "Come on, let's go in and see if they'll give you a job." Now, if you've ever been around this sort of situation, it's really fun to watch as a kid. But my great aunt, Sister Mary Justin, walks in ahead of me, and you could just see the manager going, "Oh, this is serious." And he says, "Oh, hello, sister. How can I help you today?" She said, "I would like you to see if you could help my niece get a job for the summer. She needs a job right now." Oh, absolutely, sister. I'll be glad to take care of you, sister. Absolutely. And how many days a week does she need to work? Well, she'll have to let you know that, but she needs to pay off a phone bill, so you're going to have to set her up. Oh, absolutely, sister. Absolutely. Comes around, says, "Why don't you have a seat? I'll bring you some lunch on the house." Because that's the benefit of having a penguin as a relative. You know what I'm saying? And so we sit down, he brings over the application, he gets me all set up, and, sets me up with the job. And Sister Mary Justin drives me back to my grandparents' house. What I didn't know was the penance, the purgatory of waitressing for the summer in orange polyester with pantyhose and white plastic shoes. I had no idea what I was in for. Not only that, but on Friday nights was kids eat all they want pancakes. All they could eat pancakes. Every Catholic family from Framingham to Natick to Marlborough was in that Bickford's every Friday night, coming in huge tables of 16, 15 kids with their parents, and they're all screaming at the top of their lungs, pancakes, 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 and smearing syrup everywhere. But yeah, I started earning tips, and the next thing I knew, I was getting closer and closer to paying off that phone bill. By the end of the summer, I was like, I am going to pay off that phone bill, and I am never going back to waitressing. And when I told my grandmother that, she said, you still have to pay for the clothes I bought you. Thank you. So we're going to take 10-minute, stand up stretch sort of thing, and I'm going to take a few drinks of water, and then we're going to start back up with 2 more stories. I'm back. Woo-hoo. I'm going to be inappropriate for just a second because the guys were like, do you want to take the mic off the stand? I'm like, I hate microphones. They're so phallic. I just, hate them. So I'm managing just fine. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So there he is. That's the man. This is the man who raised me. He was a dapper dude. He was all about being dressed up. My friends hated him. They all said he was a dick. Nobody liked him, I mean, parents, if you're a parent, you do the best you can, and your kids don't recognize it till much, much later, or they have their own kids. That's how it goes. But my dad gave me a lot of advice about work, and our family is very much about the work ethic, like the Foleys. Yeah, you could ask any of my siblings. We're like, they make the inappropriate comment that we're like Jamaican because we all have more than one job. But it's true. We all have had at least working one job. And of course, I'm no different. I have right now 2 jobs. But one of my favorite things that my dad used to do was give advice about how to deal with challenging people in the workplace. But usually the way he delivered it didn't really come out so kind. It wasn't really diplomatic. And he used to start everything with me about, anything he had to say. Let me tell you something, Red, because that's what I was called Red. So he called me Red. And so whenever I would come to him to complain about work or something, he had these great sayings that he would share with all of us, but particularly with me because I was with him and my siblings were out on their own. One of his all-time favorites was, let me tell you something, Red. If you're not the lead dog, the view is always the same. Yeah. Okay, so, he was like all about being in charge. Like, he was in charge. He wanted you to be in charge. He wanted to know when I was taking charge. If you got mad at somebody in the stores, he would say, hey, buddy, you in charge here? And so this kind of became a joke about within our family, like who's in charge? And that's where the Foley's in charge came from. And when my father was diagnosed with cancer, and it came to pass, we had this really bizarre moment. For those of you who remember these political things, where I forget who it was that got shot. I think it was Dick Cheney, maybe, or somebody got shot. Reagan got shot, and then whoever was in charge behind him was like, "I'm in charge. I'm in charge." Right? That I think it was Alexander Haig, maybe. Yeah. And so, like, when my dad, passed from cancer, all of a sudden, my brother Stephen, who is the oldest of all of us and 12 years older than yours truly, picked up the phone, and he was like, "I'm in charge. I'm in charge now. I'm the Foley in charge." And we're like, "Okay, all right." But work was always a challenge for Foleys. We've got a little bit of a salty side to us, and maybe a little bit of pop-off, like trying to just rein that in, because my father was always like, "Don't take any crap off of anybody, but don't lose your job." Like, that's, it's like that line is so hard to follow. So, like, as a little kid, when I was like, I don't know, 7th grade or something, I had a girl who was picking on me at school. And my dad said, "Red, don't say anything to her. Just haul off and deck her." Now, this is a Navy guy, right? This is what he's thinking. Like, people wonder why I'm, like, not very girly. Like, I was raised by a guy who took me to Irish pubs and taught me everything I know about football, okay? So he's like, "Don't say anything. The next time she ticks you off, just haul off and deck her." Okay. I'm not going to argue with my father. So the next day, out on the playground, Lauren is telling me how ugly I am, how stupid I am, how poor I am, which I already knew, thank you very much. And she's going on and on. And I'm just sitting there trying to work up the gumption to do what my dad has told me to do. Finally, I do. Bam! Sock her right in the face. Down she goes. I'm like, yes! Next thing I know, here I am, right? Getting hauled to the principal's office. I am very proud of myself. I don't care if she's bleeding, if she's dead. I have done exactly what my father expected me to do. I am a rule follower. Thank you very much. I get in the principal's office, and I know I'm in trouble. And my father comes to get me from work, which is not good. And when I get in the bus with my dad, he starts in on me. "Jesus Christ, Fred, what the hell did you do?" "Dad, I did exactly what you told me to do. You told me to haul off and deck her." Christ, Fred, her father's a police officer. "You're going to have to go over and apologize." What? But Dad, you said, "I know what I said, Red. But you are going to go over to that girl's house and apologize to her, or else her father's going to press charges." So off the bus we come. We walk over to Lauren's house. I am so angry. We knock on the door, make my apologies, and then I am not going to trust my father's advice anymore. I'm not. I told him so, too. I get a little bit older, and I go out on my own, and I get to work. I get into a work situation, and my father is like, "Red, don't argue with people. Just do your job." Long before Belichick said that stuff, my dad was saying that stuff. I think he stole it from him. I'm pretty sure. And he would say to me, "Red, if you're not number one, you're always going to feel like number two." Like, that's his advice to his 23-year-old daughter, right? Really classic advice. His other piece of advice was, if you do something half-ass, you end up looking like a whole one. Which we actually have framed and hanging in our house as a quote from him. Yeah. So later on, as he battled cancer and he was near the end of his life, my brother Stephen and I and my husband Brian, we drove to where he was living in Culpeper, Virginia, just to visit with him, and he was still in charge. He was in charge, and he was going to tell you exactly what he wanted you to do, and you weren't going to argue with him about it. And he had this whole map mapped out of exactly where he wanted his tulip bulbs planted and what color and which section. And he was on a morphine pump and Percocet, and he's up on 2 feet, bossing everybody around. And he says, we're standing there, my husband, my oldest brother and I are standing, the doorbell rings. And this guy shows up at the door and says, I'm here to take Mr. Foley for his test drive. And my father, in his infinite wisdom, had decided to call the local Lincoln dealer because he was going to buy a Lincoln Navigator, and he wanted this guy to take him out for a test drive. He's like, I'm ready to go right now. And my brother's like, no, Dad, you're not going anywhere. He turns to the guy and says, look, Mr. Foley is not going anywhere today. He's loaded on Percocet, and he's certainly not driving anywhere. After that little incident, we decided to get outside of the house, get away from Dad. My husband, Brian, my brother decide that they're going to plant these bulbs. And as soon as my dad turned his back to go back into the house, my brother looked at Brian and said, we ain't doing this. Throws the paper down, digs a 4-foot trench in my father's front yard. I don't know where my stepmother was. I really don't. I was trying to think where she was. I don't remember. Digs this 4-foot trench, takes this box of tulip bulbs, and just dumps it. All the way up and down. Covers it up, and we go back in the house. Now, time is obviously an issue for my dad. He has no idea how long we've been gone. He's loaded up on stuff, and he says, that felt quick. And my brother's like, no, it took forever. I was like, okay. Not 4 days later, my dad passed away. And about 6 months later, maybe 4, my husband and I made the trip back to his house to see if the tulips had come up. And sure enough, they had. But let me tell you, that yard was a mess, okay? Like, all the tulips are like different colors. They're here and there and everywhere. And I took a picture, and I sent them to my brother. And he said, much like our father, Jesus Christ, Fred, that yard's a mess. Those tulips look ridiculous. And I said, well, you know, Stephen, if you do something half-assed, you end up looking like a whole one. Trying to be cognizant of my time and get you guys out of here on time. So I've spent most of my this story. This story does not have a song attached to it because it's so bizarre that only those of you who have experienced bizarre and whacked out things in the workplace will truly appreciate. I worked for 35 years as an executive assistant across many fields, healthcare, Defense Department, nonprofits, and I consider to be myself somebody that can work with just about anybody. Like, I can do that thing because it's just something that we're good at as Foleys. We can get along with pretty much anybody. Mind you, on the inside, we're having an entirely different dialogue than what you're seeing out here. And it's one of the things I've always struggled with at work, because this is telling you everything I'm thinking, even though I'm like trying desperately not to let that show. So when my students ask me, like, what's the hardest thing about work? I tell them, I said, well, keeping a poker face. Keeping your face, and don't let your emotions show when you're angry at work or annoyed or just ready to quit. You just don't do that. And I got this job working in Virginia, in Alexandria, with this trade association. And they brought me in. This is 2008, 2009, right as the economy was going down the toilet. And certifications, business degree didn't matter. Like, I just had to find work, right? So my family is like, don't worry about your title. Like, that's not allowed. You better work. You better work. Like RuPaul, you better work. And so I took this job as a receptionist just because I needed work. at this company. And I was there for, I worked my way up. I was way overqualified, and I was working with people and all these really important people in Washington, D.C. who are like, if you don't know anything about Washington, D.C., there's like this whole vibe there of like, I'm important, you're not. Like this whole dance that goes with, let me show you. I'm important, you're not. I'm important, you're not. And so that's kind of the vibe of the trade association world in Washington, D.C. But it's not just the people that you're working with outside of the building. It's like the people you work with in the building who have these huge egos, who are very important, and they want to prove how important they are to everybody else. Therefore, let me run the assistant all over the building, or whatever their thing is, whatever their jam is, to show everybody how important they are. And I'd been in this role about 6 years, and I had a great boss. Great Irish lady, actually shares a birthday with my husband, same birth date. And so she was just funny as all get out. We turned out that her mother lived one street behind us in where we lived in Virginia. And I decided I needed to get a different job in the company. I didn't want to leave. The benefits were great. I was like, I really want to stay here. And there really was nowhere for me to go except sideways, right? To go a lateral job. And there's only one opening, and it's in the research department with the person who is the most conservative, personality-free, number-crunching introvert on the planet. But I can work with anybody. So I go to my boss, who had been trying to get me promoted or to get me some other job, and she's like, it's just not going to happen, Kemetia. You're going to have to leave to get another job. And I said to her, I think I'm going to apply for that job over in research. And she says, oh, kiss that up to God, Kemetia. Don't do that. That's not a good idea. You don't want to do that. And I said, Lynn, I got to do this. She's like, no, you don't. I'm like, yeah, no, I got to. I'm gonna go crazy, or I'm going to get fired, because I'm so bored. So I go over to this department and start talking to this woman who's the head of the department. And I'm thinking, I could talk to anybody. I could get along with anyone. Now, this department is all men except for the director. And anybody that I could work with that could talk sports, we're going to be golden. Although they ridiculed the hell out of me for always picking my kicker first in fantasy football. But we had a great time. And when I interviewed with her, she said, I think you'd be really good at this because you've worked at Excel as your role, and you'd be really, but we work hard here. I'm like, okay. And we go off to a conference 3 weeks later. I get hired. I get into the job. We go off to a conference 3 weeks later, and she is mean. Like, she is just mean. A mean person. Like, she is not kind one bit. And I'm like, how's this going to work? Because I am just the opposite of that. We go off to this conference, and everybody is avoiding this person like the plague. But we have to work together. I can work with anybody. And there we are at this big conference table putting together the swag bags for the conference, and she's standing next to me, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be the big person here. I'm going to take the higher road. I'll be like, oh, how you doing? Great. What do you got going on after the conference? I'm going to be going to a competition. Oh, okay. I know she runs, right? Because we've talked about our ghosts, our sneakers. And I was like, oh, so you're running. Now, all the other people that we work with who also have a challenge with this person are standing across the table from me watching this exchange very carefully to see what's going to happen. When I turn to her and I say, oh, are you going to do a marathon or like a 10K or something? And she sneers at me and she says, no, competitive pole dancing. And I'm in the senior group, and they won't let me do the one activity of hanging upside down that I know I can do. Now, mind you, this is my boss. I am having a heart attack right there in person. Lovely ladies who are working with me across the table, they must have seen, because you know this is showing it, right? I'm like, holy crap. I didn't see that one coming at all. You couldn't, never. Oh. And so one of them says, oh, yes, I've heard about that. I heard there's a competition. Like, there really is. Like, there's a whole national thing. Like, people compete in pole dancing at different various ages and levels and the whole shebang. Now, this is where my Catholic upbringing kind of messes with me, right? Because I'm like, judgy, okay? I'm going to be like, oh, pole dancing, huh? You're one of those people, right? And I'm thinking this the whole time and knowing it's showing in my face when luckily this woman across the table from me starts talking to her about her competition. And I escape and bolt back to the elevator to go up to my hotel room, and I call my poor husband. I'm like, I've been traumatized. I can't, oh my God. And I think I don't remember exactly I'm sure he could tell you about it later, but I was like, you're never going to believe this. And I tell him. He's like, what? I'm like, I know, right? But now I have to go back to work with this woman. The next time I see her, we're at, conference, right? She pulls out her phone. She's like, want to see my competition outfit? I'm like, all right, I'm trying to keep my job here, people, right? I just flat out lied. I'm like, oh, if I see your outfit, I'm going to have to go to confession. Thank you, though. Thank you. I'm not going to be able to do that. And, I just try to avoid her. Meanwhile, what I didn't know, my entire office already knew this about her. And I found it out about a year after. So I make it through a whole year, right? She's competing. She's telling me about it. She's constantly trying to show me. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, what's this all about that you want me so desperately to see your competition outfit? I don't want to see that. And so I make it through a whole year, and I'm at a department meeting. We're doing some website work with one of my 3 guys that I work with. And he goes, check this out. Did you know that she has a Facebook page for her competitions? I'm like, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. I said, how did you know? He said, oh, everybody's known forever. Even the board of directors know. I'm like, I have kept this under guard. I've not said anything for 18 months. I have not said anything. I want to keep my job. I don't want to see the pictures. I don't want to hear about it, and I don't want to talk about it. Oh, man, you're missing out on all the fun because everyone's been talking about it for like a year. Where have you been? I said, trying to keep my job. But she was persistent. Like, she won a first place prize, and she wanted to show me the first place prize. And I was like, how am I going to, like, it didn't even occur to me to go to anybody else with this. Like, it was such a mess, right? I was like so conflicted. I'm like, I want to support a woman for doing her thing, but at the same time, she's my boss, but she's pole dancing, and I don't want to see her, like the whole thing was just totally anxiety provoking. But she was not nice. Like, I couldn't wrap my head around, like, who is this person that likes to hop on that thing, swing it all around, but then come to work the next day, totally suited up in black, and just mean as a mother. Just like I just couldn't reconcile them. After about another 6 months or so, I was like, I got to get out of here. It's time for me to go. Time to go. And I started looking for other work. And the guys I worked with they're just awesome. They were like, don't worry. Every time she'd come out to yell at me or try to get me to do something I didn't want to do, they would be like, no, I got you. And the guys would cover for me. They'd be like, oh, no, Kemetia's going to do this and I'm going to do that. They were so awesome. So they decided to have a going away party for when I finally land my new job. And all of a sudden, she's Miss Bubbly. She's bouncing up to me. She's like, oh, I want to throw your going away party. Sure. And all the guys are like, I'm like, I gotta leave on good terms, right? I need to be able to get my job and, use her as a reference, right? Sort of, kind of. So they planned it for this big pub down in Old Town Alexandria. And everybody went. It was a lot of people. It was a lot of fun. There was about 45 people at our office at the time. And I grabbed one of my guys, and I said, look, you stick close to me. You do not leave my side during this party. Do you understand me? You do not. You are going to stay right here with me because she is not going to get me to look at her competition photos. I don't want to see her costumes. I don't want to see anything about it because, frankly, it's just too traumatic for me. He's like, don't get so worked up. She's not going to do that. I'm like, okay, cool, but stay with me. Stay with me. So certainly the party starts to wear down. I decide to be very gracious and thank her for the party. She's been fine. She hasn't done anything untoward. Everybody's very awkward because they don't know what to make of her. They're really happy for me to get out of there. Like, they're super happy for me to get out of there. But at the same time, they're trying to be, like, gracious with her, just like I was trying. And as she's saying goodbye, she goes, I'm going to go ahead and leave. You guys stay and finish out the party, but I've got to go. She goes, by the way, did you know that the senior management team all got new headshots, for the website? And I said, oh, no, I didn't. Look. And it is not that kind of headshot. As a matter of fact, it is a full-on with 6-inch black and red heels, and all parts are visible. And I am smacking the hell out of my friend. I'm like, dude, get me out of this. And he turns around, he just starts laughing. He thinks it's funny. I don't think it's funny at all. I said, that's not a work picture. That's not a work picture. That's not a work picture. I can feel my stomach like I think I'm going to throw up. The guys all think it's a riot. They're like, look at her. She's getting ready to lose her crap. And I turned to her and I was like, do you want to find the real work picture? And I'll look at that. And she says, sure. She flips it over, and I said to my buddy, I'm like, can you check? Can you make sure it's the real picture? Because I swear, like, at that moment, I felt like drinking, okay? Like, I was going to pick up. I was like, this is too much for me. My poor heart, like, I can't do it. And she showed me the real, management photo picture, and I was like, all right, have a great night. Have a great night. And so, left, and, the party ended, and I get to a couple weeks later, I get to my new job. And the boss says, so, can you tell me about your most recent challenging situation? And I said, no, actually, I can't. Thank you very much. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate everybody's support.